Hey now, it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo walnut ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and this has been a pretty wild week in TNA. There's been lots of news to talk about. I touched on a lot of this stuff during the Mike and JD show this week, but I'm going to go ahead and hit some of these topics again because on the Mike and JD show, I actually had one BQ from the Impact Lounge. He was filling in for JD this week because he and I were talking earlier in the week, and he was wanting to do a talking TNA and wanting to know when I could do it. And I was like, I could do it Thursday. However, JD had literally just told me that he had a wrestling tournament out of state and he wasn't going to be able to make the show. So I was like, well, why don't we just do a double episode here? You come on my show, we'll go live, and then immediately after we can go and record your show. And so be on the lookout for the Impact Lounge where we did. It was basically kind of like an overtime, because we had our Mike and JD show. Like the episode was pretty TNA heavy. So if you haven't listened to that, please do. I'm actually going to clip all of it. I just have not been able to get a chance to clip it, but please go ahead and go check that out. I would greatly appreciate it. And give BQ a shout out because he did really great on the show. Whenever I have a guest on, I try to play to their strengths, and so that's why it was a pretty TNA heavy show. But we did venture over into talking some AEW stuff. So, because of course AEW's got like controversy all the time. That companies can be a mess sometimes. But yeah, man, lots of TNA stuff going on this week. I want to get this out of the way though, just because the Bound for Glory final tally for Bound for Glory. Let's see, where was it at? So if you guys remember, I've been tracking this every single week, and Slammiversary was at like 26,000 pay-per-view buys. Most of that would have come from actually like the bulk majority of that would have come from streaming buys. Hold on, let me so the bulk of that would have come from streaming buys. Yeah, so like 3 times as much as the television buys. Well, they had about 26,000 for the final estimation from Dave Meltzer. Well, he has it in his observer that Bound for Glory is now down 2.8% of pay-per-view buys from Slammiversary. Now, he didn't do the math there. I did the math, and I will do the math again. What is 2.8% less than 26,000? And the answer is 25,472. So that looks like it's going to be the final tally. A little over like 25,500 pay-per-view buys for Bound for Glory, a little bit less than Slammiversary. And if you factor in Hard to Kill doing just like over 60,000 buys, and then I don't think that Rebellion even made it to 10,000, to be honest with you. I think Rebellion was way down. But that's a hell of a freaking year. That, like, if you take a look at that average, that's pretty freaking wild. I think I'm going to do an article towards the end of the year just talking about the success that TNA has had in 2024. It's going to be one of my end of the year things. Although, fuck. I start my master's. I'm finishing my master's. I got my last 2 classes. I started them today, so I have homework to do tonight. And tonight was going to be the night that I do some of my stuff. So I think I'll be able to get ahead on my master's here in the next couple of weeks. I usually work ahead, and so I think that towards the end of the year, like around Christmas time, I'm gonna try to have an in-depth article, kind of like the article that I did. I want to say back in October, where I broke down the year's ticket sales, like all of the available ticket sale information. So I think what I'll do is have an update on that, and then I'll run down the ratings that are available. And basically, I'm just gonna go through Jedi Goodman's deal. So go through his Twitter account, and I'll probably try to figure out Spoiler Plus, Spoiler TV Plus, and try to get that, and then I'll try to get a good accounting of all the ratings throughout the year, just checking ratings trends and seeing where they started at and where they're finishing at. I think that's that would be pretty interesting to do. And then of course track all the pay-per-views, and I'd like to get an average pay-per-view buy number together for everybody. I'm using Dave Meltzer as a resource, so I think that's going to be coming here towards the end of the year. But yeah, it looks like a little over 25,000 pay-per-view buys final for Bound for Glory. That should be the last time we talk about that, unless he has another update next week, but I don't see that happening. All right, let's get to our top story. And it's a doozy. Again, I talked about this on Thursday night, but I think I let BQ handle the bulk of that conversation. So I'm about to go off a little bit. So brace for impact. All right. This is from the Observer. TNA claimed more than 1 million votes were cast for a poll on where to hold major pay-per-views in 2025 between New York and Los Angeles. Sounds like a gimmick, according to Dave. Dave, it doesn't sound like a gimmick. It was a total gimmick. There was no way in hell they had 1 million votes for that. First of all, that didn't happen. I love that they said it. I kind of I'm with it. It's a bit Court Bauer for me, but I'm like, I track what you guys are doing. You guys are like, look, you're taking big swings, so you're promoting, you're bullshitting a little bit. I respect it. All right, I'm not mad, but on this show we have to tell the truth. Ain't no way in hell there was 1 million votes cast for that poll. 0% chance. Even if there was 10,000 people that voted 10,000 times, I don't believe it. I don't believe the number. Okay. He says, sounds like a gimmick because after the voting, they announced dates in both cities. I can get verification if we get somebody from the Brace for Impact chat group in here that the moment that they announced this, I said they're going to both cities. There's no chance they're not going to both cities. This is their way of drumming up interest for both cities. I said it. I was right. I called it from the beginning. The voting was fake. The voting didn't count. It was not a real thing. They were always going to both cities. Again, I respect it. I get what they were doing. They're bullshitting a little bit, but they're promoting. That's what promoters do. When you're promoting, you got to bullshit a little bit. All right. This was just their way of getting, drumming up interest, getting people talking, getting fans in those areas excited, and getting fans to advocate to come to their city. I did see some social media buzz about it, so it very clearly worked. Okay. We said, but they are ambitious. Rebellion will be April 27th at the Galen Center in Los Angeles. So that's at the campus of USC. That's where they play basketball there, which holds 10,258. So probably 7,500 for a pay-per-view setup by TNA. The New York show will be Slammiversary on July 20th at the UBS Arena, which holds 19,000 for full capacity and probably 13,500. He goes on to say, both seem very large for TNA. Well, Dave, that is quite the understatement, which hasn't drawn more than 3,000 to a show in years. We'll have to correct Dave there. They drew about 3,500 for Slammiversary last year in Montreal. Now, a lot of those were comps, but they still did. They still had more than 30. They had 3,500 in the building. So we have to give them credit for it. However they got them in there, they got them in there, right? That's it. They also announced March 14th and March 15th in El Paso. That's another 10,000 seater, that venue. And March 28th and March 29th, dates in St. Joseph, Missouri. That's right outside of Kansas City. The big show of that month will be Sacrifice on March 14th, with TV being taped the next day. St. Joseph will be TV tapings for both nights. Tickets for New York and Los Angeles go on sale on December 20th. Yeah. So that is quite the swing that they're taking in 2025. Billy, I got my boy Billy. Billy will very likely be at the UBS Arena show, which is the most ambitious venue that I think the TNA has ever booked. I want to say probably in history, except for lockdown IO, correct me, Lockdown 20, the one with Bully Ray and Jeff Hardy. I think that was the Alamo Dome, right? So that was probably the biggest ever. This is probably right behind it. How many at Forbidden Door? That should be TNA's goal. Brother, that's an ambitious goal because that was 11,000. That was 11,000. I don't want to make any bets because I still own a Big Con t-shirt based off my last bet, but I don't think they're surpassing Forbidden Door. I don't even think they're coming all that close. I don't think so. Yes. Lockdown 2013. Io, I love you, buddy. I'm gonna get to this comment in a little bit though. I'm gonna hold that comment. Hold that comment. But yeah, I think these people are crazy. I do. But look, what have I been saying on this show for years? It's time to go big. It's time to take a swing. Because they were just, for the longest time under the Scott D'Amore era, I felt like they were just happy producing content. They were just a content farm for a network that needed content. They weren't fighting, right? They weren't they weren't trying to compete. They weren't trying to do anything. They were just happy to exist and not lose and try not to lose money. That's what I always felt about this company, right? Like as I started to cover them more and more, I was like, oh, because in 2018, they were really interesting because they were on the brink of death the year before. And then Scott D'Amore and Don Callis came in and took over. And so I found that to be interesting. Like, here's this company that was almost dead, right? They get bought by this bigger like this Canadian network. And let's see what they do to pull themselves out of it. Let's see what they do to pull themselves from the brink of death to stabilize the company and then start to compete, right? Well, they pulled themselves from death. They stabilized the company. They got themselves on Access TV. And then I felt that once they got themselves on Access TV, they quit caring. They stopped trying to gain momentum. They stopped trying to do anything. They would occasionally have the really good they would occasionally have a really good storyline. I felt like they did a great job by partnering with AEW, but that whole thing went to shit eventually. But it just seemed like they were very much a company owned by their TV station, and they didn't really have to fight for TV ratings every week because they're owned by the network, and the network is not going to cancel them because they're the highest rated show. No matter what their rating is, it could go up or down 50%, and it wouldn't change a damn thing, right? They're still going to be the highest rated show because Access TV outside of Impact is like averaging probably like 5,000 to 10,000 viewers, right? So TNA Impact is, significantly higher than anything else that they do on that network. So I felt like they were just creating content for the sake of creating content. They weren't really trying to drum up interest. And a lot of the arenas they were booking were telling me that they weren't really trying to drum up interest for their shows. They were just happy booking cheap venues and, getting the same couple hundred people in those things. Well, then they shit canned Scott D'Amore earlier this year. And they were like, I think it's time for us to do something. Like we got something here. They're a bit ambitious, quite a bit ambitious, and I respect it. Now here's the thing. Galen Center, I think, okay, 7,500 setup. I think that if they get 4,000 or 5,000 people in there, that's probably gonna look pretty decent, right? I think that'll look decent. The way that they could set it up, I think that would look decent. Probably like empty hard cam side, like behind the camera, like the whole thing is empty, and then but in front of it, like if they fill it up, it'd probably look pretty good. If you do 4,000 or 5,000 people at the UBS arena, this is what Billy's saying. If you draw around 4,000, it's going to look awful. They know that it has to be done sort of a WWE collaboration. That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point. I don't know that they're still collaborating all that much. We had no WWE talent on at the latest tapings, and I think that's a good thing because I felt like the relationship had gotten stale. I think that like TNA was on NXT every week and NXT was on TNA every week, and we got to the point where we no longer cared. Okay. I still think Joe Hendry is going to be in the Royal Rumble, but I don't know how much they're going to be working together. And WWE to this point has not sent any significant stars to TNA. I don't know that they've even asked. I hope they have, but as of now, they have not sent anybody of significance to TNA. So we have to figure out how they go about filling this venue up. They're going to need every gimmick in the book. And I talked about it on Thursday night, but they're going to need, lockdown. They're going to need, Ultimate X, bring back some legends. Like if you're going to flip the Kurt Angle switch, like that would be the night to do it. Right. If you can get WWE stars, like that's the night where you call up WWE, you beg, you plead, can I just have AJ for one night, right? Like that's the night that you bring in AJ Styles if you can get him. That's the night, right? That is the big night. Whatever rabbit you have in your hat, you have to pull that. You have to pull it out, because if you do anything like less than 8,000, it's gonna look like shit. It really is, and it's gonna sound bad. And the perception is, so if they do, like, say they do 5,000, right? That is the biggest show that they've done in forever. The perception will be that it's still a big failure because you did 5,000 at the UBS when AEW did 11,000 with a joint show in New Japan, and it is, whatever, a 13,000 seat arena. Like that becomes tough. I wanted them to do 5,000 this year, but I wanted them to do 5,000 in 2025 in a venue that holds 5,000 people. like that's what I was talking about. I was trying to get Io, trying to get Io to start the 5 for 25 campaign, and I challenged him big. Like I was pretty brazen about it. Do 5 for 2025, but I meant do 5,000 people in a venue that holds 5,000 people. Like that was my idea, not what they're doing. But you know what? Like I completely respect this, and I think they got a lot of balls to try this. I just hope they have a plan. I hope they know what they're doing. I hope they have a rabbit in their hat. Now let's get to the comment that Io said before, because I'm exhausted by this conversation, but I think it warrants it. I think now is that we can bring it back a little bit. But then eventually I'm going to have to ban the conversation altogether. I'm going to have to put people in timeout for bringing it up. But Io says they must have a new deal on the horizon. Okay. Matt Hardy has been talking about this for a while. I feel like this company has been talking about this for at least 3 years. At least 3 years. I don't think they have a new deal on the horizon. There was at one point where there was enough chatter that I felt like they did. But then when the rumors started that AEW was getting a Fox deal, I was like, okay, I was like, I just don't think there's any hope for TNA at that point. I really don't. WWE moved NXT off of USA. They went to CW. I don't think CW is bringing on a second wrestling company. Not that WWE would. I think WWE would block it. I think they would silently block that. But they would have to do it in a way that it doesn't get out, because they just got sued for doing that to MLW, and they don't have exclusives on their contracts anymore. But I think they would. I think they probably would, but they would do it in a way that nobody would find out. They would have to be more secretive about it. So I think that removes, CW being removed from the table, which I felt like before NXT went there, CW was a viable option. I was talking about it at the time because they'd worked with the guy that runs that network before, Brad Schwartz, on Pop TV. TNA was on Pop. They didn't really fit that network because like their lead-in was like reruns of Gilmore Girls, and it's like that doesn't really jive with pro wrestling, right? Like this doesn't make any sense to have pro wrestling on that channel. So Once their contract was over there, they were off that network. The CW they would jive with. CW's got a lot of sports. They got a lot of action shows. They got a lot of DC shows, stuff like that. So pro wrestling jives with the network, and then they ultimately went with NXT. Which I think that if you were a network exec and you had the opportunity to have either NXT or TNA, you're probably going to go NXT depending on the price. And I felt like they got a favorable deal. So it makes sense. But it's been they've been on Access TV for over 5 years now. They feel comfortable on Access TV. But this does kind of tell me, these moves in 2025, this does kind of tell me that maybe they think that they got something on the horizon. If I were a betting man, and I am, I would bet that they don't have a TV deal. That would be my bet, but I'm not willing to bet a lot. like that's more of a cup of coffee bet, because it really it really does seem like they're taking big swings for a reason, and they might have something coming down the pike that's going to really surprise everybody. Or they could just be like, hey, look, Joe Hendry's hot, Hardys are hot. We don't know how much longer they're going to stay hot. We're hoping till July, and we're going to just try to go as big as humanly possible. And because our TV show really doesn't matter. Like the TV show, like I think most of the people, and Billy could correct me, most of the people that come to those shows are just like casual wrestling fans. It's like, oh, wrestling's in town, and they just want to go to a show, and like TNA has a billboard, and Hardy Boys and Joe Hendry. Hardy Boys are one of the most famous tag teams of all time, and Joe Hendry's been on NXT recently, and he's like TikTok celebrity, and he's going on the local news, and he's they're convincing people to show up, and people are showing up. Tickets are cheap. It's like, okay, it's a night out. Tickets are cheap. I think that I think that's kind of what's going on. So I don't think that they probably think that they don't need a TV deal to get people to show up, because a lot of the people that are showing up aren't really watching their TV show anyway. The majority of the people that are buying the pay-per-view is watching the TV show, but the people that are buying tickets, the majority are not watching the TV show. And Billy says, correct, most aren't TNA fans. So I don't know. Now, if I were a betting man, I would bet that they don't have a TV deal on the horizon. So then we got to figure out, well, how else do they plan to get people in the building there in UBS? Let's just set aside Rebellion, because I think Rebellion, the Galen Center, Ring of Honor did the Galen Center. Let me see, ROH Galen Center ticket sales. Let's see what they did. For their ticket sales. And so they were there in March of 2023. It was Supercard of Honor. And so Ring of Honor did the Galen Center, and it looks like at the point that this article was written, they had done 4,200 tickets. I don't know what the final crowd was, but here Wrestling Observer newsletter has updated ticket sales numbers for AEW events, including tonight's Ring of Honor Supercard of Honor card. That event happens at the Galen Center in Los Angeles, and there are 4,276 tickets out. This is the third largest crowd in the history of Ring of Honor. The get-in price on the secondary market is $45. So that's the target right there. Like if TNA has a target, it would be that 4,200 number that Ring of Honor did. I think if they can do better than that, they get to 5,000. I think that's a smashing success. So the target for the Galen Center is probably 5,000. UBS Arena, to make that look good, to make it palatable, and obviously to get your money back, because if you don't sell enough tickets, you might lose your ass. I think that target has to shift a little bit and probably go up, and you're probably going to want to get closer to 8 to 10,000 there. I don't think the target is to beat Forbidden Door, because I don't think that is a reasonable target. I don't think that that's a possibility. I just don't. And in fact, they should set their expectations a little bit lower than that. Like I said, shoot for 8 to 10,000.